Your Excellency, past presidents, directors, and honored guests. At a dinner in March of 1988, Tony Vance Rebenzi asked a number of his friends to recommend speakers of note for his upcoming year that he was going to be president of the Empire Club of Canada. Michael Wilson's father had been the president of the Canadian Club, so as Tony was leaving the party, His Excellency jokingly said to him, "What was the name of that club that you're a part of and that you're going to be president of?" A few weeks later, Tony recalled receiving a call from Ottawa, and this is what he had heard. "Tony, this is Mike Wilson. I wonder if you would like to have a couple of my friends over for dinner on June 21st. The friends turned out to be President Reagan and Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, plus their staff. Just the day in the life of the president of the Empire Club. Sure. Now, I'm still hoping for that call about having President Bush come. When we were celebrating the 100th anniversary of founding the Empire Club, Tony Vance Rebenzi asked Michael if he would call James Baker to come to talk to us about the war in Iraq. It happened. So it is very important that we had the ambassador come speak to us today, because he's always had a very special friendship with our clubs. We all know him as the architect and negotiator of the Free Trade Agreement when he was finance minister. Bay Street knows him as the former vice chairman of RBC Dominion Securities and later chairman of the UBS Canada, as well as the director of such companies as Manulife Financial and British Petroleum. Educators know him as the chancellor of Trinity College and the recipient of numerous honorary degrees. The medical profession knows him for his extraordinary leadership in battling schizophrenia and other mental health problems. The diplomatic community knows him as a senior statesman, a superb negotiator in such matters as the softwood lumber dispute, and a man with exceptional relationship skills. His friends know him as a loyal, caring, decent person who can always be there to count on for support. They also know that he travels with his golf clubs at the ready. And one of the less charitable friends said that he didn't receive his Order of Canada for his golf. Ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Honourable Michael Wilson, Ambassador to the United States.
Well, thank you very much, John, for your kind and generous, very generous introduction. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to see you all here. Many familiar faces in the audience today, and I should say even my family have come to listen. But my first speech to the Canadian Club, I think, was about 25 years ago. That was before you were born, I think. So you're very kind to invite me back again. I'm delighted to have this opportunity, but I think it's also a real tribute to your patience and your forbearance to hear me from time to time at this podium. Now, normally in a speech like this, you'll hear a discussion of bilateral tensions and issues between Canada and the United States, talking about how we're going to settle our differences, how we're protecting the Canadian national interest. But our embassy does some very good work in promoting our national interest by working with the United States on many global hemispheric issues, and that's what I want to talk about today. We are separate sovereign entities. We each have our national interests and priorities. Sometimes they differ, regardless of the governments in office. But many times they converge, where our shared values put us side by side, where we work together in common endeavor. That said, we of course have our own traditions and domestic political drivers. Our histories and formative experiences are different. Now, the management of this relationship is always a topic of great fascination to most Canadians. Sharing a continent with the world's preeminent military and economic superpower naturally makes most Canadians keenly aware of the bilateral relationship. But our broad multilateral interests are often critical in setting the tone of the relationship and are essential to our work at the Embassy in Washington, but also with our colleagues in Ottawa. How and why Canada and the United States work together in the world. How and why Canada pursues common causes with the United States globally. So I want to focus this lens on areas where we are both seeking to shape a complex and perilous world and protect ourselves in it. At heart, my belief is that Canadians are overlooking this important aspect of our relationship. We lose sight from time to time of how much Canadian influence is expanded and deepened as a result of working with our allies from all parts of the world, but especially the one closest to us, the country with which we, of all others, are intimately connected in so many aspects of our daily lives. Yes, they are a superpower, and we aren't. That makes the range of possibilities available to the United States in shaping the international agenda very different to those available to Canada. That has its advantages, but also its disadvantages. We must not diminish in any way the role that we're able to play on the world stage. Prime Minister Harper recognizes this. Canada is now stepping up and taking principled positions on important issues facing the world. We're determined to show leadership on the world stage. Over the years, Canada has been able to establish a strong and proud reputation internationally because we don't have the same range and possibilities as the United States. Without these, we've had to rely more on diplomatic skills than on the exercise of power. But I would add, we've also been successful because we are seen as being closely connected to the United States. We're neighbors, and we're friends and allies. We are alike, but we're also different. How does this all add up and affect us internationally? Let's start with the globalized world in which we live. What Prime Minister Harper has said is true for both our countries. The globe, he said, is becoming a village, and virtually every significant challenge that we face, economic, environmental, demographic, security, health, energy, you name it, contains an important, if not critical, international dimension. So the question becomes, how do we position ourselves in addressing these challenges? In this globalized world, no country is an island, paraphrase John Donne, not even those which are islands. What are the areas in which the coincident interests, common objectives, and shared values of Canada and the United States, in fact, reinforce Canada's policies internationally and support our national interests? A little over 5 years ago, North America was attacked. September the 11th changed the world forever. It vividly brought home a new reality. Threats to global security, and specifically to our security, come from terrorism. Since then, we've seen other terrorist attacks in Bali, in London, in Madrid, and foiled attempts in other countries, including right here in Toronto last year. We are not immune. Within months of 9/11, Canadian troops had teamed up with U.S. forces in Afghanistan. For the first time since the Korean War, Canada and the United States were standing together again in armed combat. Our common goal, to ensure that Afghanistan cannot and will not become a haven for terrorists plotting or executing attacks against our countries and our citizens. Canada continues to play a key role in Afghanistan. We have commanded the NATO International Security Assistance Force. Our 2,500 soldiers have been at the forefront of this effort to stabilize this troubled country. But we're there in many other ways than military alone. Canadian diplomats, development workers, experts in governance and policing. reconstruction and development are tied inextricably to Canada's presence. In fact, Afghanistan receives more development assistance from Canada than we provide to any other country. We are making progress, a testament to the will and fortitude of the Afghan people. A new Afghan constitution promotes the rule of law and respect for human rights, including those of women and children. Women now have the right to vote, and girls can go to school. Our troops and all Canadians in Afghanistan deserve our support and our prayers as they work to bring security and democracy to that country. The importance of our presence, our contribution, our sacrifice in Afghanistan does not go unnoticed. Starting with President Karzai, who used the occasion of his visit to Canada last year to tell Canadians how grateful Afghans are for our help. And time and again, I hear from Americans from many walks of life expressing their appreciation for our efforts. We are there because the Afghan government needs and wants us. We're there with 34 other countries because UN Security Council resolutions have united the world against the terrorists who had established themselves in Afghanistan. But fundamentally, we're there because it's in Canada's security interests to stop terrorism at its source. A common endeavor is also very much in evidence in areas of non-proliferation and disarmament. The possibility of terrorists or rogue states obtaining weapons of mass destruction is a growing risk and must remain one of our central security objectives. Here we stand foursquare with the United States and our other allies in trying to stop or roll back this threat, nuclear, chemical, biological. We're there in the G8 and the International Atomic Energy Agency, particularly on the challenges posed by North Korea and Iran. And one of the most significant areas of common endeavor to reduce the threat on proliferation is the global partnership against the spread of weapons and materials of mass destruction, established by the G8 in 2002. The United States and Canada have taken a leadership role in this. The global partnership is not only directed towards stopping the spread of weapons and weapons-making knowledge and materials. What is particularly notable is that it results in actual disarmament, actual destruction of stockpiles of chemical weapons held by the former Soviet Union, cutting up nuclear-powered submarines, and disposing safely the fissile material in the nuclear reactors to prevent terrorist acquisition of this dangerous material. In all these areas, the Embassy plays a key role in advancing this agenda with the United States. We also highlight these Canadian contributions when we go on Parliament Hill, on Capitol Hill, among think tanks, and with the media, to show how Canada is playing a real, tangible, and substantive role on international security issues. It also means intervening regularly in the policy-making process. For example, during the recent Iraq debate, we've worked to ensure that decisions taken on Iraq would not compromise the U.S. commitment in Afghanistan. Indeed, we're working with the U.S. to press our NATO partners to add troops. Now let me turn now to Latin America and the Western Hemisphere. Until recently, Canada did not pay sufficient attention to our hemispheric neighbors. This is changing. The government has stated its intention to accord a greater priority here to a region where we have significant political and economic interests. Indeed, Canadian investment in Latin America has tripled over the last decade to $96 billion, exceeding that which we have in Asia. Clearly, we have an obligation to our citizens and also to this region. Our North American neighbors welcome our increased interest and have high expectation of a growing active partnership. This is a region where we can work with both our U.S. and Mexico as partners. What are our objectives? Well, what you would expect. Consolidate democratic gains and strengthen freedom, human rights, governance and the rule of law, enhance security, and protect and grow our economic interests. As we've seen with the numerous recent elections in Latin America, there is nearly universal democracy, but an urgent need to strengthen institutions. There's an active civil society, but also a rise in populism and authoritarianism. Poverty is declining, but socioeconomic exclusion and gross inequality still persist, along with signs of returning protectionism. Overall, we in the United States share common objectives here. So how do we work together? We can work together to strengthen regional organizations, and particularly the Summit of the Americas process and the Organization of American States, which we have increasingly used as the vehicle for our assistance to the region. Here we work closely with our embassy to the OAS, which is co-located within our main embassy building. And we both are in constant contact with the State Department and other Latin American organizations in Washington to develop views on how Canada can advance this agenda. Indeed, just last week, I hosted a working dinner where a number of experts discussed ways in which Canada could make a real difference. Similarly, with the Security and Prosperity Partnership with the United States and Mexico. At the Embassy, we seek to advance thinking on 5 priority areas agreed by the leaders last year in Cancun: economic competitiveness, coordination on pandemic influenza responses, energy security, emergency management, and smart, secure borders. Prime Minister Harper will host the 3rd summit later this year. Now, in the Caribbean, Canada and the U.S. will continue to play lead roles in the UN-mandated efforts to support Haiti's slow recovery process. Last week, following regular interactions with the Embassy, the U.S. State Department held a high-level consultation with Canada to review our respective policies. In addition, we can both encourage and help the Cuban people to decide upon their own future, encouraging support for democracy and economic freedom. The Embassy has been active in pursuing this issue with different policymakers in Washington and in the States on how best to support the Cuban people in this uncertain time. Our engagement and the engagement of the Embassy represents the best in common cause issues. How Canada can pursue its perspective and approach, and how we can work together towards a common objective. We can both engage Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Bolivia, and explain why open and transparent market practices are the better avenues for long-term security and prosperity. In addition to strengthening the Organization of American States, we're working together to promote the implementation on international instruments against corruption, narco-trafficking, and organized crime. A common endeavor abroad with the U.S. also extends to trade. Underlying our cooperation is a common belief in the benefits to be derived from trade liberalization and the merits of a rules-based trade system. In the World Trade Organization, Canada and the United States seek the same objective, a broad-based and ambitious outcome to the ongoing Doha round of multilateral trade negotiations, as the best opportunity for developing countries to secure economic growth and alleviate poverty. There are some clear differences in our negotiating positions, But by and large, because of our advanced economies and similar economic structure, we share much common ground. In the energy field, Canada and the United States have a strong relationship, with the U.S. being the world's largest energy producer, consumer, and importer, and Canada the largest foreign energy supplier to the United States of each of oil, natural gas, uranium, and electricity. We both see eye to eye on the importance of a market-based approach to energy resource development, our oil sands being a great example, growing from a pipe dream in the early 1980s to production today of 1 million barrels a day, on the way to 3 million or more by 2015. We see increasing amounts of oil and natural gas production being controlled by government. Russia, for example, using its energy strength for wider geopolitical ends, and also nationalization by Venezuela, Ecuador, and Bolivia. And at the recent G8 meeting in St. Petersburg, Prime Minister Harper succeeded in getting the market-based approach to energy resource development agreed in a number of important texts. In our approach to environmental stewardship, the United States and Canada both afford an important role to technology and innovation as important means of addressing global challenges and finding solutions. For example, we're already partners, along with other countries in the private sector, in the Weyburn Project in Saskatchewan to study the possibility of capturing and storing carbon dioxide in geological forms such as oil fields. Another area of multilateral cooperation where the Embassy has been active is in the preparedness for pandemics. Canada and the United States are concerned about the potential for a human influenza pandemic that would have significant global health, economic, and social consequences. Canada, drawing upon our SARS experience, and the United States have worked together, raising international consciousness and preparedness for another pandemic. While a pandemic threat is global, the coordinated response must also be at the regional and country level. And in this regard, Canada and the United States have each developed its own influenza pandemic response plan, which are continually updated and shared. We at the Embassy follow this issue very closely. I'd like to add a final area of common endeavor, one closer to home. It's directed towards the most important responsibility a country has. That is to protect and defend our freedom. The freedom, the independence, and sovereignty of our two countries. NORAD is an emblem of common endeavor. It stands for Shared Strategic Vision for Defense of the Continent, shared decision-making, and unrivaled interoperability of our personnel, radars, and aircraft. NORAD is evolving in the post-9/11 world. Last year, we renewed the NORAD agreement in perpetuity, ending the previous 5-year cycles. The new agreement gives NORAD added responsibility for maritime warning. We have a proud tradition and history of Canada-U.S. defense cooperation, arguably the most complex in the world. Over 80 treaty-level agreements and more than 250 memoranda of understanding. More than 600 members of the Canadian forces serve in the U.S., and some on exchange with U.S. forces. Canadian forces have the distinction of being the most interoperable with the United States of any of the NATO allies. We train together, patrol together, and serve together. The Defense Development and Defense Production Sharing Agreements manage defense industry trade and the related research and development, approximately $2 billion in trade flows annually. We're an integral part of the U.S. defense, industrial, and technology base, and the largest foreign supplier, contributing to both economic growth and jobs on both sides of the border, but also, very importantly, to the interoperability of our forces in the field. And a current example of this is the Joint Strike Fighter project, supporting interoperability, but also access to up to $8 billion in industrial participation opportunities. The Embassy in Washington plays a key role in this activity. We have an active and robust Defense Liaison Office, which interacts daily with our Department of National Defense in Ottawa on policy and operational issues, including cooperation on Afghanistan. Now, personally, I've visited NORAD twice and the AWACS base in Oklahoma once to underscore the importance that Canada attaches to this relationship. The Embassy has taken a lead role in addressing the current ITARS problem in defense procurement, and tomorrow we host a visit of the Minister of National Defense to his new American counterpart. On Capitol Hill, our job is to make members of Congress aware of this significant Canadian role in defending our continent and our major contribution to the campaign in Afghanistan. Now, before I conclude, I want to come back to perhaps our greatest personal and economic common cause, this being daily life along our shared borders, whether it be truckers delivering auto parts between Windsor and Detroit, day shoppers traveling between Montreal and Plattsburgh, or friends and family making a spontaneous trip across the border to visit one another in Toronto or Buffalo or Vancouver and Bellingham. The shared protection and mobility across our shared border is our most important economic bilateral common cause with the United States. After all, the border is not an imaginary line across the 49th parallel. It's an ever-evolving, complex entity that interconnects our lives, our economies, and our continued prosperity. Canada has seen a gradual thickening of the border over the past 4 years, initiatives that jeopardize our long-standing commercial and people-to-people connections. Recently, we've seen measures introduced in food inspection, as well as the WHTI, the Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative, or the new passport rules, both initiatives which, if not implemented carefully, will undermine the foundation of NAFTA, the backbone of our economic integration, as well as our 140 years of shared friendship and family connections. The air rule for WHTI will be implemented tomorrow. I expect this will go smoothly, since passport usage is around 95% between the two countries, and the U.S. intends to demonstrate flexibility in the implementation. And while land and sea implementation is still 11 or potentially more months away, we are still encouraging the U.S. to take all of the necessary time required to get this right. We cannot rush into this and have a cold turkey implementation without appropriate flexibility and phasing in. But we are encouraged by recent indications that the administration and Congress may be more flexible in the implementation of WHTI related to land crossings. So let me conclude. I've said on a number of occasions the paradox of the Canada-U.S. relationship is that the steadier it is, the more attention is given to any difference that may arise between us. Yes, we've had our disputes. I know when things are bumpy, having lived through the softwood lumber issue, but we solved it. And yes, we have a problem in the defense cooperation realm, and we're working to solve this one. My point to you is that if you overlook those areas where things are going smoothly, you miss the fundamental nature of our relationship. You're looking only at the occasional blemish on the skin, not grasping the basic sinews that connect our two countries and that give us important strengths and advantages. We also risk overlooking how Canada's international agenda is supported and how our national interests are furthered by our common cause endeavour with the United States. And that, to me, would do not just a disservice to our neighbours to the south and our bilateral relationship, it would also impede reaching our national objectives as a country. So whether it's Afghanistan, weapons of mass destruction, the Western Hemisphere, trade, pandemics, energy and the environment, or the defence of North America, there are many ways where the national interest of the United States and Canada converge. This brings real meaning to a recent observation of a senior member of the U.S. administration. He said, "We often speak of our two countries as being friends, neighbours, and allies. Canada is also a good and reliable partner." Thank you very much for your attention.